Kuiskaa niin saatana.
Hello, welcome. I've just started letting people in, but we are going to wait a couple of minutes because it's not quite on the hour yet. So I will just give everyone a minute to arrive, if that's okay.
Tuolla on koulutausta. Se on selvästi kouluväkeä.
It's lovely to see you. If you are happy to have your videos on, please do have your videos on. If you could just keep yourselves on mute during the presentation, but equally, we're not going to be a huge group, I'm sure, so I'm very happy for you to unmute and ask questions, share your opinions and so on as we go. So please do feel free to do that. Okay, so the what I'm going to be talking about today is Aspire, a model for creating educational environments where everyone can flourish. I've got some stuff to present to you, but I'm also very interested to hear your views, and there will be plenty of time for questions and discussion. And to be honest, I'm very happy to receive those questions and to talk as we go. There is just me on the call, though, from a presenter point of view, so I will try to keep an eye on the chat. But if I don't spy something and you want to ask something at any moment, just wave at me and get my attention. But first of all, it would be really interesting to know who we've got here today. So I'm just going to share my screen so you can see. Hopefully you have the right screen that you can see. So yes, absolutely, don't worry if you are doing more than one thing at once and can't join in discussions. I completely understand. I hope you can hear clearly and at least follow what we're talking about. But as I say, it's lovely to have you all here, but I am interested to know who you are, where you are in the world, because we have people all over the place, and why are you here? Is there anything particular that you're looking to get out of this session? So if you're able just to put your thoughts in the chat, that would be brilliant while I just sort out my screens. You can see several of you are typing away, so I'll give you a moment before I continue. Just while you're doing that, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. So my name's Michele Deeks. I'm an occupational psychologist by background. And I work with organisations, a broad range of organisations, helping the people in those organisations to flourish. So I don't come at this from the perspective of a teacher or an educator certainly in the traditional sense. I think I do educate in what I do. But I come to this as somebody who works with people in the workplace. But as you'll see in a moment, we have been working with somebody who has a lot of experience in the work in education around a model that she's created to enable children as well as adults within education to thrive, a model that we're taking more broadly than that. And I think for me, my background, as I say, is an occupational psychologist, but using positive psychology in the way that I do things. So taking the principles of combining the principles of both positive psychology and occupational psychology to develop solutions that work in a broad range of settings, I suppose. And so Martin, my business partner, and I set up Work Positive a lot of years ago now, more than I care to remember, to do that, to go into organisations to help people to be at their best more of the time. And a few years into that journey, if I can just ask everybody to mute, if that's okay. Brilliant. Just so that everyone can hear us, that would be really helpful. Thank you very much. A few years into us having set up our consultancy, we were starting to find challenges in terms of the tools out there that we wanted to use, the right kinds of things that we wanted to use in the work that we were doing. So we set up At My Best. At My Best is a product range that draws together what we see as the best of positive psychology evidence and evidence from other fields of psychology to create tools that professionals like yourselves, like us, can be using in the work that we're doing. We also have a couple of other things that we've developed that I'm not going to talk about today at all. Woohooyoo, which is actually it's actually a book that you can create for somebody you love to show what other people really value in them. So it's a way of collating feedback on what you really value and respect about a loved one. You put all of those together and produce a beautiful book. And Deckhive is an online tool for coaches to be using with cards and so on. So we have a variety of things going on, but what I'm going to be focusing on today is At My Best and the Aspire model, which we have been working with Dr Sue Roffey, who I'm going to talk about in a moment, on over the last year or so. But I'm just going to have a look at your backgrounds. Now you've all had a chance to put something in the chat. Welcome from Finland, from Belgium, all over the place. Yeah, helping schools to be more inclusive. I'd be really interested in your perspective. And yes, also special education. Yeah, interesting, really interesting to see what you've got to say about what we're saying today. Hi from Toronto. Yeah, really all over the place. That's brilliant. One of the advantages of doing something at lunchtime in the UK is that we can pull from different parts of the world. Well, welcome wherever you are and whatever time of the day it is for you. So that was a little bit of an introduction about me and Work Positive and my colleague Martin, but really the most important person to introduce you to today is Dr Sue Roffey. Now, Sue is, well, she was an educational psychologist, a teacher, then an educational psychologist. She's now an author and a researcher and a speaker. Does a lot of work around how do we go around creating educational environments where everybody, children and staff, can flourish. Sue's written a number of books. These two specifically talk about the Aspire model in both primary and secondary. So if you'd like to know more about her model, I'd really encourage you to go and look up those books, and also to connect with her on LinkedIn, and then you will get to more of her work. Now, Sue and I have known each other for a very long time, and a good year or so ago now, we were having a conversation at a conference where we were talking about actually one of our other tools, so our strengths cards that Sue uses occasionally in her work. And she was saying to me that one of the challenges she has with the strengths cards is that their focus is around the individual and what the individual can do to enable themselves to work at their best more of the time. So it's focused very much on the person. Useful in some settings, but the point that Sue was making was that actually the environment for her is where she focuses her attention, and the culture, and creating the right culture so that classrooms, schools, educational settings can thrive. And that started a year-long project where Sue and I have been working together to look at her Aspire model and think about how can we create a practical tool that people can be using in educational settings, but also I was interested in creating something that could be used in more workplace settings to enable everybody to be creating cultures, having conversations about cultures where people can thrive. And so that's why I'm involved, and that's what I'm going to be talking about a little bit today. Sue's Aspire model is based on a wide range of evidence and research from a broad range of fields. So wellbeing, educational research, positive psychology, neuroscience, a broad range of a broad range of fields have fed into the model that she's created. Aspire is an acronym. It's an acronym for agency, safety, positivity, inclusion, respect, and equity. And what Sue posits is that we need all of those elements for a culture to be truly flourishing. And you can see here we've got very short definitions, and these are the definitions that are on the cards. I'll be talking about the cards a bit more in a minute as a practical demonstration of how we use this model in practice. Obviously, you can have much longer definitions of these terms as well, but for each of these principles, we've got some short definitions here. So agency is that sense that people have a voice and a choice, they can influence things, and action gets taken. Safety is that broad, taking a broad perspective of safety, I think particularly in the classroom and working with young people. A number of these elements are really important. So we're talking about emotional safety, but also social, physical, digital and psychological safety. Positivity, not toxic positivity, not positive thinking, nothing, but something much more grounded around strengths, solutions, support and appreciation, all terms that have been talked about a lot over the last however many hours we've been going with this conference so far. Inclusion, so to the point of some of you saying where you work, the importance of everyone being welcome, everyone mattering and everyone participating. Respect, treating each other with care and consideration, and equity, fairness and flexibility so everyone can flourish. So those are the 6 principles of a flourishing culture as identified by Sue. And what she's talking about when she talks about those principles is not that just that people have those things, but also that they feel they have those things and they are creating those things for others. So obviously it's not difficult to imagine situations where somebody, maybe a teacher, might be saying, well, of course everybody in this classroom is appreciated, but that isn't necessarily how some children feel. And so having those conversations about how people feel, as well as how they behave, and what leads to that creating of that culture where people feel like they're flourishing, is a really important part of the picture. But the challenge, of course, then is how do we go from this model to something that is useful in the classroom and also in the staff room? One of the things I love about Aspire is that it can work across the whole of an educational setting. And we see people using this model with quite little children, quite young children, right through to SLT and all members of the support team and so on, using the same basic language of agency, safety, positivity, inclusion, respect and equity. And of course we might explain those words differently or be using those terms quite differently depending on who we're working with, but the principles remain the same. And I think one of the really important things in terms of how we go about actually working towards this is that in using the model in a context, we actually embed the principles into the approach that we're taking. So it's not just about saying, well, you know, we need to get some agency, we need to get some safety and so on. It's using methods that demonstrate those principles in action right from the outset, which again is one of the things that is lovely about the approach that Sue's developed and the use of the cards that I'm going to talk about, because it enables some of these principles to very easily be embedded right from the outset. So some of the assumptions, I suppose, that we're making with the approach we're taking are these that are on the screen now. So those people in the culture, so in the classroom, in the school, in the workplace, are the experts in themselves and the culture that they work in. And so any which way that we talk about the Aspire model, we're making that assumption, we're coming at it from their perspective. So they are the experts, they are the people who have the solution, and they are the agents of that solution. They are the people who are going to implement it. So you'll see in a moment some of the statements that we use to explore the model in a bit more detail, but it's coming very much from the perspective of we. This is something that we do. This is how we feel. This is what we think and talking about. So how do we go about creating that and making sure that is very inclusive? Building on what's working is key. Again, you'll see the language we use is very much about talking about as though this is in existence. So where do we already have this already? We use the model in a way that makes it clear that everyone's experience and all opinions are important. So this is about a collaboration. It's about something that's co-produced. Again, whether we're talking about children in kindergarten, early stages of their education, or whether we're talking about staff in the staff room. It's about taking on board all of those perspectives, because we know to create that culture where everyone feels like they are flourishing, everybody needs to feel like they are part of the solution. Everybody needs to have that agency. There needs to be that sense of belonging, and that sense of equity, that we all have a role to play in creating this, and we all can expect to be part of that. We all can expect to feel like we belong at the end of the journey. Small changes that create a positive ripple. So we very much focus on how can you shift from here to one step. I'm going to talk in a minute about laddering and scaling. How can we go from where we are to one step up? What does one step up look like? What's one more behavior we can take? What's one more thing we can be doing to move in that direction of having a culture that is even more one where people are able to flourish? And we've obviously taken the approach that providing the framework is a helpful way to do this. So we just provide the framework. We don't provide the detail, but we are providing a structure based on the evidence of what creates flourishing cultures, to say, let's talk about what we need to create within each of these principles so that we as a collective, as a culture, can thrive. And we're also making the assumption, which won't surprise you, that inclusive solution-focused approach in itself creates positive change. So recognising that the process that we go through to explore how we create a more inclusive culture, where everyone can thrive, is part of the solution itself. So the solution starts from the question we ask, rather than from the point at which we come up with our grand action plan. So I'm sure all of those principles are things that you would expect, but just to make it explicit, we're focusing on those things in the solutions that we're developing. So as I say, Aspire is a model that Sue created a number of years ago now, and we have been working on this project with her to create a tool that can then bring that model to life in the classroom and beyond. And I was actually at this conference a year ago presenting our sort of prototype of that tool. We now have the real live thing, and I can now talk a little bit more about what we've learned along the way and what the tool looks like in practice. So what happened after the conference last year is we had lots of people trialing a set of cards for us. We evolved those a bit further, went out and did another pilot, and then made some more adjustments. And so we've gathered a lot of stories of how people have been using Aspire in action. And what that's enabled us to do is trial a variety of different exercises and create a number of different exercises that we're finding useful to have these conversations around flourishing cultures in educational settings. So the end result is a set of cards. Hopefully you can see those. Those are the blank cards. It's less helpful to show you. And there are a series of statements on them. Now the cards themselves, just so you understand the bits that I'm talking about next, basically for every one of those 6 principles, there is a principle card. So this is the inclusion set, and it has that very short definition on it. Everyone's welcome, everyone matters, everyone participates. And then there are 6 supporting cards for each principle. So every principle looks like this, and they're all color coded. So inclusion's all purple. But you can also see that there are numbers on the cards, and those numbers have different shapes around them, and that's to indicate the nature of the statement. So for every principle, there is a belief, there is a feeling statement. So we feel we belong here is the one for inclusion. You can see that's got a circle around it. There's a belief statement. So everyone has something to offer is the one for inclusion. It's got a square around it. And then there are 4 behavioural statements. So like we get to know each other, we celebrate each other and so on. And they've got a hexagon around them. And these statements, of course, they are not, they are examples of things, and we think they give a pretty good picture of what inclusion looks like, but you may well add other things into that picture. We're not suggesting this is complete. And as I say, really, because what we're trying to do with the tool is prompt a conversation around the Aspire principles. We don't want to provide all of the answers. It's up for the class or the team to work out what works for them, but we're providing statements that are relevant to each of the principles to allow discussion, thought, and so on. But we then use these statements, these cards, in a variety of different ways using a number of different solution-focused techniques. So to give you an example, or a few different examples, we'll often start with the principal cards. And sometimes we've had stories of teachers taking one card a week in the classroom and running a session on that. So what does equity look like here? What does everyone think about inclusion? So to start exploring what these concepts mean, first of all, with students. And we've also had instances of people saying, well, we look at all 6 and we look at where we are with all of them. What does it look like when we put them all together, etc., and so on. So you can think there's a variety of different ways of using them. But one very common way in which we see people using them, and we will use them in practice, is to take each, or 1 or 2, depending on how much time we've got and what we're trying to focus on, each of the principal statement cards, and say, so on a scale of 1 to 10, where are we now? And to do that maybe visually by getting children or staff to line up, where are we? And then to tell the stories of what we're already doing. So what we're trying to do with all of these things is bring them to life, both so we increase understanding of what these principles look like in reality. So if we've got children who maybe are less familiar with some of these concepts at the moment, or struggling to understand what it is we're looking for, they can hear examples of success. They can hear stories of where this is working, and we can start to evolve those. So what are we already doing? And then what would 1 point up look like? So if we're going to agree collectively we're somewhere around a 5, or we're somewhere around a 6, what would a 7 look like? So we're already doing these things. What else can we be doing that would make us look like a 7? And then maybe even having a conversation about what would a 10 look like. But the important thing is to create a realistic picture of where we're heading that everybody in the room can buy into. So everybody understands what is it they need to be doing a little bit differently, or doing a little bit more of, or what can they expect of other people in the room that's going to move us from, for example, a 6 to the 7. So that's one way in which we would use scaling with the principal cards. And then, of course, there are many, many ways in which we will use the individual statement cards. And again, I've had lots of examples of people saying, well, I would just use them all, and we get kids to pick out the cards that resonate with them, and what things that they think they show, or their friends show, or the teacher shows, or the school is particularly good at, or whatever it might be. So you can do it in lots of different ways, but we also have lots of situations where people take a subset of the cards and say, this is what we're working with today. But one of the approaches we see being used quite a lot is using the counters kind of approach, or strengths-based approach. They're sort of overlapping a little bit in terms of how we would use the cards in this way. But to pick out some of the cards that are relevant to whatever we're talking about, and saying, so how do you do that? What does that look like? What kinds of things do we see people doing that are, for example, showing, how do we welcome everyone? What do we do day to day? When did you last see that? Can you tell me about that last time? Let's talk about it. So we can start celebrating the successes and really noticing the things that are working, so we can be doing more of those things. And then we'll also use them for feedback. And sometimes we'll do this in a very general way, to be asking, just asking for stories. Spreading out all the cards and then asking everybody, or some people, to share stories about what's it like to be in this classroom, what's it like to learn here, what's it like to work here, and then hearing those stories, getting other people in the room to pick out the cards that they've heard in that story, as a way of celebrating again the successes and noticing the things that are working well here, and the things that are leading to a culture where everyone is flourishing, so that we can have more conversations about how can we do even more of that. What would the other opportunities be for us to be listening more? So if we can identify that in these scenarios we tend to listen to each other, how can we learn from that to apply that to these scenarios over here? So maybe in a classroom, we're very good at listening to each other when we're all sitting on the floor having story time, but maybe there's an opportunity for us to get better at listening to each other at lunchtime when we're in the playground. How can we take the learning, or whatever it might be? And then we'll follow through and continue to use the cards for goal setting, for next steps. And that's probably makes sense based on what I've just been talking about, but again can be used in a variety of different ways. But to think about, so what do we want more of? And we absolutely don't necessarily focus on the things that people maybe that have either identified as lower or haven't picked out to say, oh, well, because we haven't talked about that, that's definitely something we should be working on. Quite often we'll pick the things that there's already quite a bit of, and build on those, because it's about building on, pushing the open door. It's about building on strengths. It's about building on the successes. And we know absolutely that by doing that, then we will start to see a shift across the board. So if, it may be that feeling of belonging is already at an 8. Well, how do we turn it into a 9? And helping children and adults to come out with those specifics. How will we do that? What will it look like? What will that success look like? And we're seeing the cards being used repeatedly over a period of time to sort of evolve these conversations around how do we create those flourishing cultures in a way that's quite playful. We've got less of that sort of, there's no sort of staring people in the eyes saying, what are you going to do? It's very, that there's that playful kind of way of doing it, making it clear that everybody's opinions are valued. We're providing the stimulus for the start of the conversation with the statements, but absolutely might then end up somewhere else. The language on the cards, or the detailed language on the cards, isn't important. It's about, so how do we evolve within those principles? But we are providing that framework of those principles based on what the research suggests are the elements of flourishing cultures. So I'm quite interested in what you think about that as a model, because obviously we are providing that framework rather than being completely open and completely client-led. We are imposing some kind of structure. We think in quite a relaxed and playful kind of way, but we are most definitely providing that kind of structure. So I'd be really interested in your thoughts, and also very happy to answer any questions. Please, again, feel free to unmute. I mean, you're very welcome to type in the chat, but you're very welcome just to unmute. I can see there's a couple of you typing. I don't know whether any of you come across Aspire before, or alternative frameworks that you use. Really interested to hear what you're doing in this kind of space, if you are doing anything in this kind of space, and also the audiences where you think it might work, or anywhere where you don't think it would. A number of you working in different contexts. Yes, Mona, please do feel free to unmute and ask.
Yes, hello. I'm sorry I wasn't able to join from the beginning, but still I've got the idea. I am involved in an educational project in Romania, and we apply group coaching methods, and also some principles from solution focus. And I think it's a great idea to use cards and these kind of questions. We work sometimes with teams, mixed teams of teachers, students, and parents. Students that are in teenagers, so not that means gymnasium, high school in our system. And for us, it's important the culture of the school, of the team, and I think these are great questions to reflect on, and also scaling. It's a very good idea, so I think it's very useful. So I'm willing to find more about it. Yeah, thank you. And
Thank you, Simona. No,
Yeah.
that's really helpful to hear, and using group coaching in that context. I think we're seeing more of that in the UK as well, where group coaching is being used in schools. And I do think I think in the UK, we've got a big challenge at the moment that I think a lot of pressure is being put on students. And they are being given responsibility where really they have very little agency. They around things that they can't control. And one of the things that I love about this model is it's about bringing it back to the people in the room about the things that they can influence. Our students can't change the curriculum. They can't change the pace at which their teacher chooses to teach them or the resources. You know, they often don't have influence over those things, but certainly in the UK, there's a massive pressure on students around performance and academic results. And we have lost sight of, in my personal opinion, a lot of the things that really matter around education, and teaching these skills and helping students to develop agency and feel like they have got some control and some influence about what happens and the culture that they're in, recognizing that they are as responsible for how it feels to be in that classroom as all of their friends and their teacher, and finding practical ways of doing that, I think is really important. So I definitely don't have any research around this, but I would love to see when we get further down the line how much impact this kind of thing can have on things like mental health and so on. I mean, that's where we've got some big challenges in the UK. Vicky.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that the high schools in so we just have a project right now with about 300 high school students. And the project was it's an Erasmus Plus project, and they came with solutions to make the education better in their high schools. And we worked as well with teachers to train them as facilitators in order to give more trust to these teenagers so that they can implement their ideas. And many of their ideas were around creating a space that is safe, a space for them where they can socialize or discuss issues that are of interest to them. And these spaces can have guests or organize. They can organize themselves to such spaces. And it was very interesting that they want to feel actually safe in school, because otherwise they feel like, even I have my daughter, she's 16 now, and she sometimes tells me that it's like she's going to prison when she goes to school. But these young people, they can actually initiate some things, and I'm happy that we are at the point where they can also show some progress and results.
Yeah, most definitely. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. And I think, yeah, that's again, one of the things that's important to us is having a tool and a solution that is easy for any teacher or any teenager to pick up and implement for themselves and feel like they have some competence to do that, feeling like they're able to do that, rather than some very complex or constraining tool. This is about taking it, putting your own stamp on it and doing it your way. And that was something that was, yeah, quite important to us. Sorry, Vicky, I think, Vicky, you had a question.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Michele. This is really great, and I love the cards. And what I really like about it is that it gives students a voice in the class, right? And sometimes students don't get enough of a voice in the class. And what I especially like about it, of course, because I'm such a great supporter of solution focus, is that it gets us to thinking about, it's not just to have this conversation amongst educational leaders or, leaders who want to support people in schools. It's not just about having the conversation of giving them a voice. The question is, how do we give them a voice? Right? Because, giving students a voice sometimes can result in really problem-focused kinds of conversations which do affect self-esteem and safety at school and those kinds of things. So I love the fact that the cards are centered on giving a really productive voice and generating conversations that are inherently solution-focused.
Thank you, Vicky. Yes, exactly that. And I think I see from my personal experience as a parent where that happens, where, children and parents are given a voice in the sense of the school says, tell us what you think. But it's very much at that kind of level, which just feels too difficult. You can't put your arms around that. You can't, I think it's very hard for teenagers often to understand what's meant by that. What is a useful conversation or useful feedback? And I think, and again, it doesn't feel co-produced, it doesn't feel collaborative. And that's one of the things I think that's very important to us around if we're going to create educational settings where there's high levels of well-being, where students can properly flourish, then it is something that needs to be co-produced, and providing this structure sort of enables them to do that. Yeah. Patricia, I can see just your questions. Yes, to be completely transparent, I am not somebody who works typically with the children in the classroom. My work is often typically with the adults. So in an education setting, I would be working with the people who work there most of the time. I have done some stuff with older students. However, the model was developed by Dr Sue Roffey, who absolutely works with lots of kids and has done for many, many years. Much of her work has been in the primary sector. So she uses circle solutions as a solution she works with. She often trains teachers and people working in schools to work with their students. But she works mainly in primary. But the cards are being used across primary and secondary and in much broader settings, so community and workplace settings. When we originally trialled them, we had ed psychs and teachers working sort of across the spectrum, and not just in the UK. The original trial was sort of worldwide. So being used in a variety of different ways. And the intent, we've made a big effort to make the language accessible. Now, that I'm not suggesting that every 4-year-old is going to understand every word on the cards, but we've tried as far as possible to make the language accessible to a 4-year-old as well as to a 54-year-old in terms of what that might mean for them. So you can see we plan carefully. We share resources. So some of the language is a bit trickier. We feel we are treated fairly here, but hopefully all concepts that anybody can access. And again, you know, the point is that people are interpreting these phrases and in terms of what's meaningful for them, and we're not set on the language. If you then change the language to something else, absolutely fine, because the point is it's provided the prompt for the conversation. You don't have to stick with those words at all. What is really nice is where people have been able to work with students and with staff, because you're talking about the same framework. You still talk about Aspire, whether you're working with students or staff. And of course, we would argue that if you're trying to create a culture where everyone can flourish, you can't limit that just to staff or just to students. It's about the whole institution, because students influence staff and staff influence students. And what I often find in my work when I'm working with staff is they will look at the kinds of solutions we're proposing and tools that we have, and they say, oh, that'd be great with my students. So, well, but what about you? You know, your well-being, your performance, your ability to work as a team, the culture that you work in is as important as that one that you're creating for your students, because you know, how do you create a culture where everybody can flourish for your students if you don't have that for yourselves? And we see that influence massively. Again, one of the things I would get on my soapbox about is, you know, poor teacher well-being is having a detrimental impact on our students, I think. Any other questions? So I'm just looking at thank you for all your comments. The cards, I will put a link in the chat. So if you are interested in the cards, you can find them here. If you want to know more about, and there is a little bit more on the website about the model and so on. The other thing actually is on that website, you will find, if you go to atmybest.com and make your way, if you look in the menu, you'll find there's a user hub, so user hubs, and you can find the Aspire Culture Cards user hub. And in there, you'll find more information on the cards. And if you scroll to the bottom of there's an interview that I did with Dr. Roffey. And so there's a lot more information there about her model and how she came to this and so on. And she also talks more about the books. So I would absolutely look that up if you're interested in more in her work and what she's done, and also connect with her on LinkedIn and so on. And the cards, you can buy the cards on that site as well. So if you go to the shop, you will find them there. From our point of view, of course, we would love you to use the cards, but the model is really the most important thing for us, and that we're trying to get that message out there about these principles, and that if we can work around these principles, then hopefully we can create cultures that enable staff and students to thrive across educational institutions. Has anyone got any other questions? So we've got another 5 minutes or so. If anyone has any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. I will put up this slide as well while we're here. So that gives you that website again. And also that QR code will take you to our newsletter. So if you're interested in staying in touch and hear about other webinars that we're doing and so on, we're doing a webinar later this month, actually, that is about the Aspire card. So it's about the cards and how to use the cards rather than the, obviously we'll touch on the model, but it is very much about how to use the cards in practice. So if you want to stay in touch and hear about that, then please do sign up to our newsletter and we'll let you know. But yes, any other questions or comments or other people's experiences? Yeah, absolutely. All of the principles can be applied with adults. I'm using them outside of the education setting, in the workplace, and they are being very well received as well. They're being used a lot in teams, but also interestingly being used with leaders, coaches. We've got coaches using them with leaders to help the leaders think about, so what's my role in creating this culture here? You know, where do I feel our culture's at? And then going away and asking other people, so what do you think? So a way of sort of sense checking whether leaders are in tune with what's going on across the rest of an organisation, and then thinking about what their role is to play in shifting the needle towards a culture where people are flourishing even more. Sorry, my silence, I'm reading through the chat. Does anyone use any other model or anything else in this space around cultures? Anything else people are doing? It's one that's really easy to combine with a solution-focused approach, I think, which is nice, because then we have all the tools available to us in terms of the structure and the techniques to be using. Yes, Simone saying that using lots of visual cards. Yes, we have Dixit. Yes, a great tool, and anything that's visual or just a little bit playful. I think one of the things that we do, you know, I'll do my team and coaching work and so on, is using other cards. We've got strengths cards and so on as well. And one of the huge advantages of them is that the conversation is about the tool in front of you, not that the tool is at the center of the conversation, but it just detracts a little bit. So it makes it feel less intense, I think, when you're being asked to read statements or words off cards rather than being asked them directly, and also gives permission. I think one of the things that we often find is that people struggle for the language. So if you say to people, so what makes an organisation flourish, they don't have the language readily available or feel like they're going to be judged for the language they're going to use. So by providing a start point for that, that takes away that bit of tension, and it makes it much easier for the conversations to flow. And there can be I've had some great conversations around the differences. So, you know, if we're talking about, we get to know each other here, and someone says, you know, we do that, we're brilliant at that here, and someone else said, oh, interesting, that's not one I would have picked for us, tell me why, tell me how. And so you start to unravel the differences in perspective, the differences in language, what works for one person that might not work for another. Can be a really, really useful way of helping teams and classrooms connect a little bit more when they develop their understanding of how we all see the world a little bit differently and how different things work for us, and something that we thought might be landing really well might not be, or this thing is great and I'd love you to be doing more of it. So it opens up all of those conversations as well, which I think is really helpful. Okay, Well, if there are no further questions or conversations, then I'm very happy to end the presentation here, but I am equally happy to have further conversations. So I will let those of you who are due to go off to other sessions, please do that. But if anyone has any particular questions or conversation want to have, then I'm very happy to remain on the call for a little longer. But thank you very much for joining me today, and enjoy the rest of the conference.